I met Vince Hemingson in 2007 or 8 when he started taking some classes with Vancouver Photo Workshops, where I was an instructor. Vince had a long list of stuff prior to him coming in. It's not like he was honestly a student, he was just someone trying to brush up on some skills. He has a long history of visually working with cameras, doing documentaries, and working on a pretty big website called The Vanishing Tattoo. Vince and I have had a pretty good friendship over the years, sharing a lot of learning through figure and nude photography, and honestly, also both of us attending very similar master's workshops that Vancouver Photo Workshops was putting out. It's really nice to be able to catch up with Vince. I talked with him just at the beginning of the crazy COVID, and I'm glad that he spent the time, and glad he's still up and healthy. So please sit back, enjoy just a little bit of a longer conversation with Vince Hemingson, and recounting all of our fun together. Hi, Vince. It is really nice to see your face. And it's kind of a funny position because I see way more of your face in your head than I used to. Like, you used to have a lot of hair.
Yeah, no, this is the coronavirus quarantine buzz.
Yeah, the quarantine buzz. It looks good on you. Looks good.
Oh, I know. I took a selfie right after I did it, and then I shaved my head just because I'd never had a shaved head before. And I may have to start trying to book work as an extra because I look like a great heavy.
Or a mohawk. I mean, you can grow. Can you still get it all the way back, or is it bald back there?
Oh no, I got fuzz. I got fuzz everywhere.
The bear.
Well, it's like, yeah, it's like, you reach that stage in life where you have to trim your ears, trim your eyebrows. You get these nose hairs.
God.
Yeah,
Yeah. And this is reason why we stay behind the camera a lot. So.
Yeah, I'm no longer young and beautiful.
No, you've had a pretty good career too. So.
I had a good run.
I want to chat a little bit about your early career, some of the documentary stuff. Just give us a little bit of that background and your inspiration for some of that. Make it a little bit short because I know you and I know some of the chats.
Well, that's the whole job of the interviewer, is to steer me and cut me off.
I got breaks today.
Okay.
So cheers. And when is it that you started? It was the visible, or sorry, I'm totally wrong. The Vanishing Tattoo.
Right. So we're live and recording.
Oh, I've been recording since the beginning of this.
Okay.
So this is it. But yeah.
I had a film production company, Pinnacle Entertainment, and the Vanishing Tattoo started because I was just getting divorced. I was 33 years old, and I kind of wandered off the reservation a little bit. I was in a car accident, and I had back surgery, but I had to wait almost 18 months to book my back surgery. And so in that 18 months, I had all this time on my hands, and I started to write a screenplay that had a tattoo artist in it. And so 1993, tattoos were very much a fringe activity. I mean, the only people who got tattooed were sailors, women of easy virtue, and criminals. And
yeah. That's the year that I started my tattoo shop.
Yeah, I love the idea of having a screenplay that spent a lot of time in a tattoo shop because my dad was in the Navy. I had some friends of mine who were tattooed, and at that point in time, I didn't really have any tattoos. And I did, I got another motorcycle. I started hanging out with the Sioux Medicine Man, and I did a 10-day sweat lodge and a 10-day fast, and I started to hallucinate and have visions. I believe there was some mushrooms involved. Anyway, I had this vision where I was covered head to toe in tattoos, And I went into West Coast Tattoo, and I got 4 tattoos in one day. And that's how I met Tom Lockhart at West Coast Tattoos.
Yeah.
And so I was working on the screenplay, and then one time I was getting another tattoo from Tom, and he started telling me that he'd been to Southeast Asia, and he'd been to Borneo, where all of these Dayak and Iban indigenous peoples were covered head to toe in traditional tattoos. And so we're now talking pre-internet, so there wasn't that much information out there, but I was fascinated with that. And my screenplays sort of, I thought, wow, this would actually make a fantastic documentary. And I talked to my documentary partners, Jack Silberman, who I'd worked with at Northern Lights Entertainment, and he was made more than 30 documentaries at that time, and PJ Reese, who was a screenwriting partner of mine, and he'd done a bunch of documents. So we threw together an idea for a documentary film series and pitched it to National Geographic International, and they said, yeah, that sounds like a great idea. And that was how The Vanishing Tattoo started.
And the reason I kind of want to go right back to that is I think there's a few elements, obviously, that play into the way that you see and or produce things, or why you produce things the way that you do now. But that shift between, we met each other in, I guess, just before the new millennium. Was it, oh, no, maybe it was a little bit after that, 2003, 2004.
Were you at VPW, or did I meet you
The
Vanishing Tattoo?
No, I met you at VPW. You had come into a couple of classes, and that's when we met.
That wasn't until maybe 2009.
Oh,
because we shot the tattoo project in May of 2010.
Yes, right. And I don't want to jump to that yet because
the year before,
right,
2009.
I
didn't consider myself a photographer until. The really interesting thing about The Vanishing Tattoo is that even though it was almost a $500,000 budget for a half hour, or pardon me, for a 1 hour, for a 90-minute documentary film, and I think our final budget was like almost $400,000 Canadian, and it was a co-production with Natural History New Zealand. Now that sounds like a lot of money, but it's not. So I was being paid a producer's fee, a co-writer's fee. Brian Smith, who was the president of National Geographic, said that him distributing the film was contingent upon my being on camera as the quotes unquote everyman, air quotes everyman, because he liked my energy during the pitch meeting. And because I wanted to produce and direct, I never wanted to be on camera. But in order to get the financing, I said, yes, of course I'll do that. Well, actually, Jack said it for me. He goes, yes, Vince will be on camera. And there was a line item in the budget for photography. And I had a Nikon F3 and a Nikon F4 and a bunch of, probably 7 or 8 lenses at that time, because I was a kind of ardent amateur photographer.
Yes, you had a lens collection, man. Did you ever?
Yeah. And so I said, yeah, I'm going to take that thing where it says on-set photographer. That's going to be me. And I started doing a lot of, and for The Vanishing Tattoo, there wasn't a lot of great photography of indigenous tattoos, and most of the photographs, you and I talked about this, the photographs of people with tattoos was mostly biker magazines, where you had a cute girl in a pinup pose on the back of a Harley showing her tattoos, and then the tattoo magazines was not great.
No, this was definitely, there was a tipping point at which I guess media kind of caught up with the tattoo, right? So I was interested in photography because my background, was I'd been to art school and I painted, and so I had I kind of been steeped in kind of the classic art history and art school education, where there was rules and there was a way to learn something, and I took that into and I had been to film school, so I brought all that to my take on how to photograph it, and as a documentary filmmaker, and working with National Geographic,
I was after a really specific look.
Yeah. So you had to kind of develop, I mean, you had to cut your teeth developing a style out of, you know, out of an idea, really. You know, you had to kind of move into
Yeah.
that and create your own visual style with that sort of, with that imagery, which really, I mean, when I owned the tattoo shops, like you said, there wasn't really artistic or kind of high level, or it was really hard to find too, right?
Yeah, but also, I mean, even it was fascinating because starting from the mid '90s, when tattooing was,
Yep.
you know, it was the people in the industry were really interesting because they were outliers, they were rebels, and people, you know, they didn't fit into societal pegs. You know, they were really interesting individuals. They were
Yep.
eccentrics. They were one of a kind. I mean, they were incredible characters. You know, there was sideshows and carnivals and
Well, and this is where some of that overlapped with some of the some of the community that I knew.
It was always in the sketchy part of town.
Yeah.
It was just, it wasn't like soccer moms getting tattoos in malls.
No. It wasn't designer tattoo time.
No.
So,
and of course, but also the interesting thing is that the tattoo art has really evolved. I mean, it's
Right.
gone from making flash off the wall to one of a kind designs that and the tattoo artists are coming out of art school and there's, you know, the techniques and the artwork has developed by leaps and bounds.
so
But I kind
you,
of miss the old days because, and doesn't every guy always misses the old days, right?
yeah, a little bit. I mean, I miss just being in a tattoo shop every day, but I miss those old days. So the tattoo documentary that you had started to do gave you access to a lot of these amazing tattooists that were changing the face of tattooing, that had created the face of tattooing, and you started to play with your camera. Fast forward a little bit. So if we kind of get together around 2008, you've got a little bit of time there where you're playing around with the camera as a bit more of an amateur photographer. What were you shooting then, and what inspired you, or was it just a continuation of a lot of the tattoo?
Yeah, well, in terms of for the Vanishing Tattoo, I was shooting slide. I was still analog. I didn't buy my first digital camera until the fall of 2008, and it came with a 740-page instructor's manual. And I looked at that and I go, histogram.
And I think that's where we met. That's around the time.
Just after that, because I bought it at Lens and Shutter,
Mm-hmm.
and Langara offered a free one-day tutorial, get to know your DSLR. Right. And I met Jeff Waddell, who taught that.
Yeah.
And Jeff goes, well, you're actually pretty good at this. And I go, well, yeah, I've been a photographer for 30 years. But this is my first digital camera. So, and I was fascinated. And within like the first month of me owning, and I bought a D700, and I just bought the body because I had all my Nikon lenses. And the first month I took 10,000 pictures. I was taking 10,000 pictures a month right out of the bat.
Yeah.
And I had to upgrade my computer to deal with all the files. But so I took a one-day class with Jeff, and that was in August. In September, he taught an introduction to digital photography at Langara, and I took his class in the fall of 2008. I then took a class with you, January, at VPW.
Yep. Yeah.
Yeah.
That was quite a while ago. Now, the shift from your film to your digital. This was a huge thing for me. It was a big change in my life. I had a really good friend who, you know, we were taking a drive one day and he was asking me, you know, what's your film budget? Like, how much are you spending a month in film and processing and model fees? And, you know, at that point in time, I was probably spending it wasn't a whole lot even, maybe $1,000 a month, maybe $800 a month. And, you know, that's not a lot once you're processing and developing and printing. And he kind of was like, you should get a digital camera. And I said, well, I don't have the money to blow on a digital camera. And we were taking a drive out to a television set. And he's like, well, I'll help you out. And I was like, well, put your money where your mouth is. And the next couple of days, he drove me down. And same thing, I picked up that my Pentax was the first one, and I started shooting. And I was able to pay him back really quickly because, like you say, all of a sudden you're shooting a lot of frames, and you're able to turn around the business, I think, or at least making a little bit of money from the camera quite a bit differently. There was no huge debt that was going into, 8, 10, 20 rolls of development. You were just starting to shoot and starting to learn.
And you had a photo shoot, and you shot maybe 4 to 6 rolls of film,
yes.
36. So you only shot a couple hundred.
Yeah,
frames.
a couple hundred, exactly.
And then you send it to be developed. And then if you were serious, because I had my own darkroom, so then you did a contact shoot. So it could take weeks before you actually got around to making a print.
Yeah.
With digital, the turnaround was so quickly that it perfectly suited the obsessive compulsive in me. And and I was a horrible chimper at the beginning because I instantly, every time I took a picture, every one that turned out good, I instantly looked at the histogram, and I had always, I never shot, I always shot manually in terms of, I was always most, I always wanted aperture priority, and that went, so that was good for me to have all that analog experience, because I wanted to shoot the way I had with analog, but the instantaneousness of digital was unbelievable. Within the first year, I shot for 100,000 frames.
Let's touch on this just a little bit. I mean, your knowledge of analog, really, when people pick up a digital camera, they're in auto or they're in a priority mode. They aren't necessarily in manual. And I think that, like you said, you pick up a camera. It only took you about a month or two with Waddell to kind of realize what you're able to do with this thing, because you already knew. You're already looking through lenses before. You were already seeing what a picture and what that camera could create. But it was trying to learn this new tool. And for some people, you grab onto it and it makes total sense. For some people, it takes a little bit of time. But when you're blowing through 100,000 pictures, you're learning and you're skyrocketing your...
Oh, it's exponential. Like, I mean, back in the day, Cartier-Bresson used to say, it takes you 10,000 frames. Your first 10,000 are terrible. Well, I did that in a month. The average person, it would take them years to shoot 10,000 frames simply because of the cost of it.
Yeah.
These photons are free.
These photons are free.
Photons are free.
Yep. Okay, so we're into the digital world now. You're shooting a lot. We have Vancouver photo workshops with Mark Kugel, who I did a previous talk with. That'll be out by the time yours is out. And it was a great creative environment. And I remember you coming in with this idea of the tattoo project, which really, it dovetails so well with your early career and with the digital world. So can you talk about that project a little bit, what it was, the inspiration for it, if there was any other more inspiration than you had already done a lot of tattoo stuff?
Yeah, well, I also had the Vanishing Tattoo website at that time, which had 20 million unique visitors a year. I mean, the Vanishing Tattoo was the largest and most popular tattoo-related website on the internet. And I was looking, after having done the documentary films, and of course, around 2010, we're also 2 years after the market crash. So distribution funds and financing for documentary films disappeared.
Yeah.
It disappeared. It was just it was bizarre. And I was looking to transition into doing more work. I had the Vanishing Tattoo website, and I was looking for content. And there's still, it was interesting to me that Irving Penn and Richard Avedon and Albert Watson were all photographers who'd shot people with tattoos, because photographers were always looking for interesting subjects. And, Albert Watson went into Angola prison to shoot inmates with tattoos. It doesn't get more interesting than that. And they're beautiful photographs.
Yep.
So I was interested because I've been to Langara and I've been to VPW, so I've met all these, photographers, and I thought, wouldn't it be interesting to do a documentary of getting 10 different or a dozen different photographers shooting the same group of tattooed subjects, and it would be a way to have beautiful, interesting photographs of people with body art, and also to show the way that 12 different photographers can shoot the same person, and you get 12 totally, quite oftentimes, totally different images, and oftentimes you can't even tell it's the same person being photographed. I thought that was a great idea for a documentary film.
Absolutely. And the conversation that started out with Mark and you and I, and kind of these ideas, and then Aura hopped in. I think the back and forth and just how quickly that kind of came about. Again, at a special time and at a special place. It was the right time, the right place to do this. So we spent 3 days.
Well, not quite.
Oh, no? Oh,
almost. This close. Came this close.
With?
What was that? Maxwell Smart, Get Smart. What was the line? I came this close.
Well,
yeah.
We produced the weekend and you produced the film.
No, well, the film never got distribution. So,
yes.
But we had a book. We had a
right.
a calendar. We had an amazing gallery exhibition on Granville Island. So there were a lot of things that were great, and the book's done very well. And all the proceeds went to a good charity. So there's that.
Oddly, well, I'm going to link in the link for the book in the description of this. Maybe I'll actually get out and buy one. I still don't have one in my possession. The funny thing is,
did you not get a copy? Okay.
No, Vince. No, I did not get a copy.
The other day, like literally 2 or 3 days ago, a friend of mine's in a used bookstore, and she goes, "Guess what I found, Vince?" And she holds up a copy of the Tattoo Project book. She opens it up, and inside is my inscription to one of the models who begged me for a copy of the book. And there it was in a used bookstore. I'm thinking, because I think I only had like 10 copies of the book from the publisher. Yeah. I can't believe you don't have a copy.
No, I don't. No, I don't. It's okay. I can't find the book though, but there's a little bit about the Tattoo Project. So let's see if I could just.
Well, just go to Amazon and type in Vince Hemingson.
Oh, geez, that's an easy way to do that, eh? Well, there.
I know it's great.
It's a description, but you know what else I think is great is we'll just pop this up for a second in the background. Is the documentary that you did? There are a couple parts that are up there.
Say, what's the name
this is Lyle Tuttle.
Well, I tell them it's El Reno. And that's out on the beach in San Francisco, and that was inside of my business card for years. Right. So I used to orchestrate photographs, because I always kept my photograph in a business card.
Oh, geez, and then it trails into like, that's me, doing a photo shoot in the alley. You had some amazing connections with people, and it blew me away to kind of meet people like Lyle Tuttle, and to be able to have dinner.
He's the godfather of, the modern age of tattooing. May he rest in peace.
Yeah, we lost Lyle. That weekend was, I think, pretty pivotal in honestly even some of the stuff that I created. I touched on technology then that was totally new. You were producing some images for huge light boxes, which looked great at the show. But like you said, it was a special time of seeing 12 people create a whole type of different imagery, and then to culminate that into a book or into a show. I think it was a really good thing to see a project come to fruition, minus distribution, but to really come to fruition. And after that,
yeah, we had Bob Baxter, who was the editor-in-chief of Skin and Ink magazine,
right, yeah.
which I always maintained was the best of the tattoo magazines, because of his emphasis on the research and the history of tattooing, and another rest in peace, Bob. And he and I had a relationship that went back at that time,
quite
10 years.
Yeah.
And so it was great to have him be there because he had been writing about the tattoo world for a decade.
Yeah.
And he won magazine awards for Skin and Ink, which was unheard of for a tattoo magazine. And he was kind of blown up. I mean, his foreword for the book is interesting to read because he was blown away. All of his issues was filled with tattoo photography, but he'd never seen tattooed subjects photographed the way our weekend photographers did.
Yeah.
And it was a fascinating experience for him as well, which really made it worthwhile.
Yeah, my series of photos didn't hit well with him. Do you remember that? Do you remember?
I don't remember that.
Oh, I had used a tilt shift lens to specifically only get focus on the eyes.
Right.
So most of the tattoos or the tattooed faces, like we met a couple of great tattooed people, most of the tattoos were out of focus. So when he was looking at them, he's like, well, what are these? I can't even tell what the tattoos are. And I said, well, as a tattooed person being in this group of 12 people who are photographing other tattooed people, I think I'm maybe more interested in the connection with the person and with the eyes than I am about the tattoos. And it just kind of fell flat. It was like, nah, I would have liked to see the tattoos. And I was like,
well, that was sort of like it was interesting because, Spencer did the before and afters.
Yeah.
And Jonathan shot a person's eye and then their favorite tattoo.
Correct. Yeah.
And so there was a lot of really interesting, because everybody was worried about their concept, and Dan put everybody into either a wife beater or a boy beater. The white tank tops.
Yeah.
A lot of people had different.
Puya had some amazing images.
What was their concept?
Yeah.
And which is a great thing if you're going to do conceptual editorial photography, it was interesting to see how 12 different photographers approached the subject matter. And, we had one photographer who shall remain nameless who just never finished. So it was an interesting experience. I mean, for me, that 3-day weekend, I think I slept 2 hours a night because you and I were actually subjects. We got photographed by people. Yeah. We were trying to photograph 40 or 50 people. And I was producing, I was interviewing people, I was photographing, I was dropping my pants and getting in front of the camera.
I forgot that I modeled for people. It was done on the weekend of my, it was done on the weekend of my birthday. And I really remember being in there and kind of having a few birthday beers. And I think the little bit of the interview that's online too, if you look up the tattoo.
Oh, yeah, you
I was happy.
You have, you're happy, you're exhausted.
Yeah.
Because also you and me being tattooed, and because like Mark said, I don't like tattoos, and yet he was photographing tattooed people.
Yep.
And part of his interview is interesting, is it changed the way he thought about tattoos. Most photographers were interested because they're just interesting people with interesting stories. And it's interesting to photograph. But for you and me, who had a love of tattoo, we're heavily tattooed ourselves, had really were part of that lifestyle and culture.
Yeah.
It was quite emotional to see and then remember all the people we had craft services, and we had people scheduled to get photographed every hour.
Yeah.
There were lots of people who stayed for the full day.
Oh, they just stayed
because there was a big craft services table, and yet. To be surrounded by other heavily
that was it.
People,
the social, like they hung out.
I had people come to me in tears and said, this is like such a special, this is really special, Vince, that you're doing this and that you're highlighting this and that you're recording this. This is like, it was like a love-in for body art. And a lot of people, some people who were scheduled for one day came back the next day.
Exactly.
So
they were all weekend. Exactly.
It was amazing.
It does. It blows me away to look back on that project. I still think that series of my work, I still have some of those photos kicking around. I mean, it was an amazing period. Then you and I had created not only a really good friendship, but a way to kind of creatively talk to each other. And I was producing a series of workshops all around the lower mainland of BC, where we were driving around a little bit, and it was called The Nude and the Environment. At that point in time, I saw a big shift, obviously, in your work, and I saw a whole different interest in creating images. Can you kind of touch on that and discuss that just a little bit? That early trip that we took to Nelson, to our good friend Michael Cordier's, his family's house. I guess it wasn't quite in Nelson. Sorry, you remember what town that was in? Michael's house
Was it as far as the Kootenays?
No. It was right by.
I thought it was near Nelson.
It was. Well, we hit Nelson. That was the second. Nelson was the second one, because we went to go and see Marin, and that was in Nelson and Slocan Valley. But Michael's place was near Trail. It was a beautiful place, but it was outdoors, and we had models that flew in. Michael and Doug Doyle had a really amazing connection with some models in that area of the country. And that was kind of the first big workshop and a lot of the first big tour. But talk to me a little bit about that, and a little bit about the way that it kind of, slightly pushed you in a direction.
Yeah, so 2010 was a really interesting year. So I turned 50 in 2010. And my dad had passed away in the spring of 2008. And the market crashed in the fall of 2008. So for my business, for being a documentary film producer, all of the distribution money disappeared. You couldn't get financing for documentary films. So I'd been reasonably successful, so I had a little nest egg there. And I started to think, well, what am I going to transition to? Because and reality television was starting up, and the economics of it was pretty simple. You could do a 1-hour reality television show shot locally or in people's homes with handy cams, and it would cost only like $40,000 to $50,000 for an hour. If you're shooting for National Geographic and you're a budget on location, you're looking at $250,000 an hour. So most of the television channels, like even now we have, it's if you look at History Channel, the documentary channels, if you look at History Channel, if you look at National Geographic, if you look at Discovery, it's all crap like Wicked Tuna. And
I was going to say the quality took a little bit of a dive.
Man, it's like shit TV.
Yeah,
it's low budget. You find a tiny niche, like those dumbasses in Appalachia with the ducks. And it's shit TV. It doesn't teach you anything. And it's all completely made up. It's all about a fake drama and a fake scenario.
Yeah.
It doesn't even offer people. There's no reality in reality television. It's not like you're getting a portal into people's lives that you might otherwise never get to see.
It's too scripted now.
It's just.
So let's push on from this, Vince. I don't want to show people that you're bitter over this. So let's push on.
So I've been trying to figure out what am I going to do next. So in 2010, I turned 50, and I just kind of was crazed with turning 50. I'll be dead soon. I need a new career. So I went to 16 different countries in 2010. I went to Cuba and Mexico. I took 2 photo safaris in Africa. Yep. I disappeared for 2 months. I did the Tattoo Project. I did the Granville Island exhibition. I was never not doing something, and I was shooting almost every single day.
Yep. Yes, I remember that.
And it was an interesting time.
So this is the binge sort of stage of, let's say, being digital moves in, you get inspired, you get this huge, like, kind of fire under your ass, which, there was a lot of things going on, like you say, and you binge now, and you create all these images. Yeah, obsessive compulsive. Yeah, you create all these images, and you take this time to go and travel. Out of some of that travel, you really start to hone your not only camera skills, but your eye dealing with the nude and the environment.
Right.
So you had won some awards. There's an amazing elephant shot out there. There's some great awards, and
Right.
I am not discounting any of those. But I'm really interested in how you've developed your nude in the environment from when we started to literally being award winning, being in the Louvre, being like producing stuff as much as you are, and still with the same, I think, kind of fervor and passion. Like you shoot a lot.
Yeah. Well, it was interesting because I knew, well, I shot so much content for the tattoo project. Like I photographed over 300 portraits of people with body art. And it was all, in my homage to Ruth Bernard, it was all against, 90% of it was against a gray seamless with
Yep.
2 light setup with 2 ounces. It's like, and hair and makeup and studio space. By the end of it, I was so sick of gray seamlesses and studio lights that I couldn't do any more of it. So when I was in Africa, oftentimes the light was so harsh and so contrasty that I thought, wow, this kind of is made to do black and white conversions. And that's the first time out of my Portraits of Africa series where I started doing a lot of shooting with raw digital files, but thinking as a shooting black and white, because I'd always loved 800 Tri-X. I mean, I just loved that film.
Yeah.
I shot hundreds and hundreds of rolls of that film. And the other thing about shooting big game and wildlife is oftentimes your subject infuriates you because it never looks at the camera. If you shoot antelopes and ungulates, I mean, the great thing, if you shoot antelopes, you're just going to get antelope asses because they don't even know you're there. That's just them. So then I thought, wouldn't it? And also, I'm using my 200 to 400. I'm using my 600 millimeter lens.
Yeah, some amazing lenses.
I'm shooting wide open and I'm getting compression and isolation. And I'm thinking, no one ever shoots nudes like this. Wouldn't it be interesting to shoot nudes as if they were wildlife in the environment? And that was a big part of my early concept when shooting nudes in the landscape. Because I'd never seen it done before.
No. I mean, we had started kind of that thought process a little bit. We shot in the landscape. I remember us talking about, a few of the first images that you were creating and even really like kind of fighting with, how you put the body in this. I'm going to pull up on this other frame. You were in another recent chat. So why don't you give a shout out to them?
Yes, David Romer at Lempa.
There you go. And you gave them 10 shots and 10 stories. And I'm just going to bring this up on the other screen now. So for any of the viewers that don't like nudity, this is the time where you should shut this off and you can respect Vince for the the traveling landscape photographer in Africa. That was Vince Hemingson. All right. Now, for everybody else that's interested in the work of, really kind of why we came here, let me take your name off of that. There we go. So we have your 10 images up, and the first image that comes up is an image of Engel. Let's just see if we can pop that up. There we go. So you're in the corner of this image here. Let me swap you around. This was an image that we created during the first workshops that we did with the nude environment.
Yeah, so this was in the fall of 2010?
Yep.
Yeah. So after I'd come back from Africa, I was, and with Engel, she was just open to any interesting idea. And on this shot, this is my Bill Brandt.
There you go. Yeah.
I'm shooting on my 14 to 24, and I was, I was looking at wanting to shoot nudes in ways that, I mean, because the nude has just been shot to death, mostly badly. There is no man who's ever owned a digital camera that hasn't wanted a woman to take off clothes in front of his camera. It's just the nature of life. And every serious photographer, serious artist, man or woman, you probably seriously consider tackling the nude as a genre just because of its place in art history. And if you're going to tackle the nude, intent is everything. And if you're going to ask someone to be naked in front of your camera, you have to be asking yourself the question, why? What's the purpose of this shot? And I was interested in showing the human figure in ways that possibly we hadn't seen it before, represented in ways that we hadn't seen it before. And that, from shooting it people as wildlife, to shooting all the stages of women's lives, to shooting, emphasizing how the figure can represent or mimic the landscape, trying to show the figure in a different way has always been a central part of what drives my work.
And what I think is interesting about this is almost the antithesis of the way that you use your camera now. This is like a super wide angle, super distorted, and a little bit about, I wouldn't say hiding the nude in the landscape, but almost making the nude become kind of part of the landscape, but in a pretty distorted way. I love it. Yeah, I liked where it was going, and I liked where it started.
Artists are a little bit like musicians, right? I mean, every image is a different track in an album, and you can do a conceptual album, you can do a 2-disc conceptual album, and with 24 tracks, you can approach a subject matter in a bunch of different ways.
Yeah.
And I've shot nudes from 14 millimeters to 400 millimeters.
And I'm just kind of scrolling down in that collection, and then we are going to come to some pretty amazing pieces. First of all, again, there's the tattoo project image that's mixed in with these. But let's specifically talk about how the nude in the landscape evolved from being a single nude in the landscape to being the groups of people that we see in your tree of life.
So when I started out shooting the nude in the landscape, so at the same time that I did your workshop, I also did workshops with Greg Gorman and Ralph Gibson. And for Ralph Gibson, I speak about intent, and Ralph Gibson always spoke about point of depart. What's your point of departure? Where are you going from? And it's when you're starting a new series to create a body of work, it's like most of the fine art models that I worked with were professional fine art models, or they were agency models who were willing to shoot nudes. So you're photographing women who are in their early 20s. They're physically attractive and they have beautiful bodies because that's who gets hired by most photographers. And most most women doing nude work are getting hired by male photographers. That's just a fact. So the more I shot, the more I was interested. So what does a nude in the landscape mean? This is my obsessive compulsiveness. What is a nude? What's the landscape?
Yep.
So over time, I shot almost 365 days of the year. I shot nudes in the snow, in the spring, summer, fall, winter. And so it was really interesting the difference in the foliage, the seasons. So I thought, and because of my background with documentary films and being kind of an amateur cultural anthropologist, I thought, wouldn't it be interesting to portray the seasons of a woman's life as well as the seasons in the landscape? Because I noticed early on that a lot of my peers, many of my friends are women artists, and they're in their 40s and 50s, they would look at the work and they go, yeah, it's beautiful. And but I could see that there wasn't a strong connection to it. And over time, I realized that when people are responding to art on an emotional level that really resonates with them, it's because they can identify with it. And it was fascinating to me. So I would say to my older friends, well, I'll photograph you. And they go, well, no one's going to want to look at me. And I go, what are you talking about? You're beautiful. And they go, well, you should have seen my boots when I was 30, or my ass was like, when I was 27, my ass was, I go, I'm sorry, but I don't see you as being less beautiful because you've aged. It's just part of your life's journey. And that was and then I realized that I was 50 years old and I knew so little about women, it was astonishing. I tell people all the time, I've learned more about women in 5 years as a nude photographer than I did in my first 50 as a man. And as I started speaking with women, and I started photographing, and I was really lucky to work with some women who were in their 40s and 50s, and I said, listen, worst case scenario, we pack a picnic lunch, we take a bottle of wine, we go to the beach. Worst case scenario, we have a picnic at the beach. Best case scenario, we have a picnic and beautiful photographs. And then they were astonished by the photographs, and it's like, is that me? And I'm going, well, yeah, of course it's you. Who did you think it was? And that was, but also those photographs of those women, which you don't normally see in fine art nudes, you don't see a lot of postmenopausal women. You oftentimes don't see a lot of photographs of women who are not a size 6 and 25 years old. So I became interested in photographing fine art nudes of pretty much all the women I knew, of all body shapes and forms, and of all different ages. And my most powerful work has oftentimes, I think, been women who are in their 60s and 70s, and they're stunningly beautiful. But if you go to Google fine art nudes of 80-year-old women, you're not going to find any. And I was fascinated.
No.
If art represents the best of our aspirations and speaks to who we are as a culture, what does it say about our culture when women past a certain age become invisible? And I couldn't understand that. But why aren't they represented in art?
All the way through.
And it was, and so, and of course, because if I wanted to show the stages of a woman's life, I wanted to shoot women who were pregnant, women who were breastfeeding, women who were with babies and toddlers. I mean, and this is an area where you got to be pretty careful because you can get enormous amounts of backlash. And I referenced Jock Sturgis, and Sally Mann, who are two photographers who I adore.
Yep.
But like the photograph I shot of you and Taryn and Hannah, when I look at that photograph, my heart goes into my throat and I get all misty because you guys are a family. It's so beautiful, and so it has so much veracity and authenticity. That's as good as I can make a portrait. I love that photograph. Oh. It's one of my all-time favorite photographs.
That's also why that weekend of creating images was very powerful for us. I mean, that was a really, we look back at that photo.
There were tears.
Yeah, it was great. So you went from working with single people and being inspired by them and being inspired by more of an umbrella of, what, nude female or the idea of nude females are. I think I lost you there. Oh, there you go. And you expanded that and you moved into doing the Tree of Life. And I'm pulling up some of these images in behind you, just so you know, from kind of your Instagram, from your show. You standing there where you have more hair. This Tree of Life, how many of these now have you done? How many iterations? How many people do you have involved in this project? And what is this project kind of doing for you?
Well, it's still part of the nude in the landscape. It's just the group shots, I think, show something of the tribal nature of humanity. Part of the human condition is that we gather in groups. And I love the cultural anthropologist in me, which was interested in showing the seasons of a woman's life. The 3 stages of a woman's life in kind of classic Paleolithic time is maiden, mother, and crone. So you can't tell when a boy becomes a man. It's, oftentimes we get, that was my fascination with tattoos, is rites of passage.
Rites of passage,
Well,
yeah. We don't have these.
Yeah. So for girls, when a woman has her menarche, she begins menstruating, she's fertile. So she can become a mother. So she makes that transition, and nature determines when she makes that transition. When a woman goes through menopause, she doesn't get to choose to become infertile. Nature says, now it's time for you to become a crone, to become a grandmother. Well, not a grandmother, but to reach that next stage in your life. And as humans, we're pretty rare as mammals go, because elephants have decreased fertility and whales have decreased fertility. So whales and elephants and humans, which are all quite extraordinarily long-lived in terms of the lives of mammals, the females are, and they're all matriarchal cultures, where older women are repositories for tribal knowledge. They're like living libraries. And those elder women, those crones, they help their daughters take care of their granddaughters, and they take care of their nieces and their grandnieces. So those women pass along a lifetime of knowledge and wisdom to the younger women and to the rest of their tribal group. So they're this extraordinarily important source of knowledge. Like, if there's a severe drought, where's the water hole that never dries up? What plants will help cure certain sicknesses? What's medicine? Providing childcare services, providing knowledge. Those crones are just an extraordinary part of the tribal culture. And I wanted to photograph those women, but I also wanted to photograph those women in groups. So in the Tree of Life, I have Chelsea with Leo, who's like 6 weeks old, I think, in that picture. And I have women in their first decade of life, and I have, I think Louise is 19, so someone in their teens, 20s, 30s, 40s, 50s, 60s, up to 70s. So I have 8 decades represented of women's lives in there, and it's such a powerful image. I've shown that print to people for the first time, and the emotional response is overwhelming, because it speaks to who we are as people, and I think it speaks to the human condition, which, if you're a photographer and an artist, you would hope that some small, tiny percentage of your work does that.
Yeah. So how did you get to that spot where you felt that you were able to kind of be the person to record that? I know a little bit of it is your own personal journey and your own kind of interest, but I think we have to be let into some of that. You have to have that door open for you. Like you said, you learned a lot about your models and a lot about the people, but who kind of helped you, or really who was that woman in that stage that helped you think like that a little bit more?
Well, I had always wanted to shoot more groups of women, but I did, my subject and friend Catherine was part of an acro yoga group, and she'd never posed nude before in life. And when we shot an acro yoga photo shoot, I mentioned to her that I had always wanted to shoot groups of women in the nude and the landscape. She goes, well, I know a bunch of women. And I go, well, I know a bunch of women. So between my group of women and her friends, we went to the beach with 9 women. And that was the photograph, the bathers, of the 8 women walking out of the sea, which I think is one of my most powerful images. And it shows women in their 20s, 30s, 40s, 50s, and 60s. And some of them have had breast cancer survivors and have had mastectomies and breast reconstructions. And a bunch of them have had children, and they have stretch marks, and some of them have had abdominal surgery, and yet they so all of these women are representations of their lives, and their bodies represent their lives, and they're stunningly beautiful.
It is an amazing image. It's in your gallery 1 on your Nude in the Landscape. For those viewers, there's 6 galleries. So there's a lot of images to check out. There is a lot of work, and I might actually be wrong of which gallery it was in. Do you remember now?
It's also in that folder I sent you, top 10.
Top 10. Got that. That's an easier one. All right, we'll pop that right back up for everybody. Because yes, this is a very powerful image. Like you said, just the range of women. Man, I love the way you're handling your lenses and your camera. It's beautiful to look at these, and it's beautiful to look at the tree of life, the textures. I skipped one back with the tree of life, so we are seeing everybody with the baby, the pregnant. They're amazing. These are amazing shots.
So I would think of one of the reasons that I wanted to, photography for me is I'm lazy in that I'm artistically lazy. So I'll spend 20 hours on a single file, but it's better than spending 200 hours on a 40 by 60 canvas. So, if I had been doing paintings, I might have like 30 paintings of a Nude in the Landscape series, whereas now I've got like thousands and thousands of images. Like I'm working on the Nude in the Landscape book, which is supposed to be my best 200 images. I'm having a hard time editing it down from 400. Because there's a lot of great images in there.
Are you having anybody help?
Me to work fast.
Are you having anybody else kind of come into that editing process with you yet, or are you trying to handle most of it yourself?
I'm in discussions with several publishers because I'm the first one to admit that editing is the single hardest thing for me to do. And if you can get a fresh pair of eyes to help you curate a body of work and sequence a body of work, it's an enormous asset. Because people will see things that you don't see. Like I remember 3 or 4 years in that I really like to photograph bums, and I've never thought of myself as a bum guy, but the photographer in me really likes the shape that bums make in the landscape.
Yeah. Yes, I had a whole series of...
And also a bum and a back is not full frontal, so that's oftentimes, in terms of the comfort level of my subjects, is also a good thing, because I'm working with a lot of subjects who've never done a photo shoot before in their life, and they've never been naked in front of the camera before in their life. So it's important for me to have a dialogue with what their comfort level is.
Let's touch on that a little bit. That also comes from a little bit of my history. That communication that you have with, a proposed model, a perspective model, and your attitude and your perspective of the way that you handle it really allows people to open up a lot more than they would really expect themselves to open up. Do you want to kind of, you see what I'm sort of getting at here is like...
Yeah, it was when I embarked upon the series, it was an aspect of the series that I never even considered because, I'm a little bit dense in some areas. So like I said, I learned more about women in 5 years as a nude photographer than I did in the first 50 as men. And I consider myself pretty a feminist, a woke man.
Yeah, yes.
And you're the left-wing liberal, and, women should get paid the same as men. They should have the same opportunities as men. It's just like, there's all this ability in the world. Why would we not want to avail the world of all of the skills that everybody can use to make the world a better place? That's just common sense to me, and I was aware of, and this is, so I was doing this work right in the midst of the birth of the #MeToo movement. And the one thing that happened is most of my shoots last like a minimum of 4 hours because you have to go to a location, you spend some time together, so I'm spending half a day or even a full day with women. And it's just you normally me and a subject or maybe two subjects, and what do you do all day? You talk. And I think there was something about being physically naked that also lent itself to being emotionally naked as well. And a lot of the women who wanted to participate in the series wanted to have beautiful photographs taken of themselves, but they also thought that having representations of themselves and images of themselves where they were nude was a way for them to take back their bodies for themselves. It wasn't like a boudoir shoot where they wanted to get beautiful photographs to share with a lover or a partner or a significant other. They wanted the images for themselves. And the reasons that they wanted the images for themselves was quite often because they had survived a really horrible experience in their life. And the simple fact of the matter is every man on the planet, 1 in 4 and probably higher, knows the women in his life have been sexually assaulted and raped. And I think I knew that those statistics intellectually, but it wasn't until I was photographing hundreds of women and they were telling me the stories of their lives, and it was so emotionally, I was really unprepared for that. It was literally eye-opening and emotional, and it was really brought home to me. In fact, sometimes I heard stories that and there was nothing I could say. All I could do was listen and provide a place for that person to share that story with me, and just be honored that they felt safe enough with me to share that story, and then to want to do a nude photo shoot and collaborate and be a creative partner with
make
me.
that a fine art piece.
It sometimes, I was overwhelmed. There were sometimes I would just like to have to take a few days off after a shoot because something had been shared with me that was just really emotionally, it was almost overwhelming.
I think a lot of times we say that, our subject matter teaches us a lot about ourselves. And in photography, people kind of throw that around, I think, pretty lightly sometimes. And then when you talk with photographers who have been involved in some, again, it looks like fine art nude. It looks like it's amazing photos to shoot. I mean, who wouldn't want to shoot this stuff? But there's a lot of time in 4 hours. There's a lot of conversations you have with people in very vulnerable situations. And usually that photo shoot is already kind of that culmination of many hours of talk and of sharing a lot of your perspective. And I think that's what's amazing about looking at your tree of life and then looking at the groups of people that you've shot is they're strong and it shows in your work.
Yeah,
So,
thank you.
You're
The
welcome.
Tree of Life was at the end of 4 hours. Well, first of all, there's all the bandwidth of having 18 people in an image and then having to pose all 18.
Yeah.
And
That's a whole other issue.
Well, you know what that's like. It's at the end of 4 hours, I had women on either side of me helping me walk up the stairs at Wreck Beach because it was all, and someone's carrying my camera gear. It was all I could do to put one foot in front of the other and climb the stairs because I was emotionally, physically, I had nothing left. I was spent. It's which was surprising to me. I never, it was part of the process that I never anticipated.
Yeah, it's pretty crazy how it can drain you sometimes.
And even but for the group of women too, there were women who actually had to go to the sidelines because it was so emotional to be in a group of 18 other women from 19 to 74, and then when we did The Village, I had 36 women from 19 to 84. I mean, 9 decades of of women's lives, and it's just like you almost, it's so beautiful, and it's the emotional level of it is it's extraordinary, and it's such a rare part of our lives. We had one young model after 3 or 4 hours of it, you go, why can't we be naked all the time? But it was just like everybody burst out laughing because there was such a strong sense of community and being part of something special.
Yeah. How are you taking all this in? If you're at a stage, let me rephrase this. If you're at a stage now of kind of reviewing some of these images and moving to your book, how much are you trying to bring these stories into your book and into that final kind of, or maybe it's only the first book of a series of books with you, but how are you are you bringing that in and kind of summing that up in that book as well?
Well, I think you and I have discussed this before. My issue right now is, a big part of my life is I've made my living as a professional writer, as a screenwriter, authoring a number of books. So I can't give proper weight to the photographs in the book without providing them with context.
Background.
And the stories that women have shared with me and the things that I've learned, I think provide context. My phone battery says it's not 10%. So I've struggled and been struggling with how to frame the photographs with words, because I think it's important for me to add textual context. And I think that some of the stories, I think a lot of the stories and the things that I've learned are things that I want to include with the body of work. In fact, I think it's essential to the book itself. And I'm working on how to do, because it's unusual for a book of photography. I mean, I've always kind of disliked artist statements, but it's the thing you have to do. Yeah. I've always thought that if you have to explain what you're saying in a photograph, then the images fail.
Yes.
And the thing is, of course, you and I had been to enough gallery exhibitions, and I always love the part where you take your name tag off so you can be anonymous, and then you listen to what people say about your photographs. And, this is where I really learned firsthand about mansplaining, which I think I'm guilty of a lot myself. Whereas you'll remember the Eros shows, Valentine's Day, all kinds of couples come to see erotic and fine art nudes, and there's always a guy who's explaining to the woman he's with about what the photographer was trying to do in the photograph, as if she doesn't have eyes and a mind of her own. And it's like
you kind of pick up on
see what the photographer was trying to do here, and I'm going, dude, that's not what the photograph's about at all. But once it's on the wall,
it's anybody's game.
There's nothing you can do about the life experience or what they bring to the photographs. It's just there on the wall, and what they see, and there's nothing you can do about it.
Well, I wonder, Vince, I mean, we are at of course, I have to get a phone call right in the middle of everything. Let's see if I can just kill that. There we go. Damn, I've got to cut that couple seconds out. Now I've got to get my train of thought back on.
While you're doing that and figuring that out, I'm going to stick a power cord in me.
All right. I'm going to stick a power cord in me. So I think what I kind of am, I'm going to challenge you just a little bit, because I think that we have quite a long history, and I've read a lot of your words, and I think that having context to your images is something that I think it's so valuable. But have you thought about actually bringing the life of the model into this, and maybe doing some video discussions of what this has meant for them, and how maybe some of those images were so strong in their life that it actually changed them? What about maybe giving the voice back to them almost as much as you've given them that strength and that power within the image?
So the documentary filmmaker in me is, I've made lots of notes after I've had photo shoots, and it's one aspect of the series that I was really shocked was how critical women were of their physical appearance. And I've done photo shoots where my subject will look at the back of the camera and actually say, almost
Ooh.
serious, "Is this me?" And I'm going,
Oh,
well,
okay. The other
yeah.
way. Yeah.
It's like, and then, or we'll make a print, and then I'll give my subject a print, and they go, "Oh my God, Vince, you made me beautiful." And I go, no, we have to stop here.
Yeah.
I didn't make you anything. You are beautiful. And I mean, you need to own that shit. You are beautiful, and this is you. I'm a good photographer, and I've just shown you.
We only got to pull technical stuff into our shoots. We got to pull the right lens and the right framing, and they bring that.
Monkey. Yeah, the monkey who collected the photons. The photons found
Photon collector. Yeah. I think it's interesting, and it may be someplace that I expand with a little bit of these talks too, because I've been pretty affected by some models in my life and pretty affected by some photo shoots. What's left are some great images for us to maybe show and kind of share a story. But, I think what you touched on today is there's a pretty deep underlying current and underlying lessons that we're learning about ourselves and about people and about, I guess, our own view of ourselves, that whole perception thing. And I'm really interested in that. And coming from specifically you and I, like talking about the nude and the nude in the landscape as that being one way to kind of think about that. It started out really early on when you were shooting the tattoos and discussing the tattoos and people's identity. People that are tattooed kind of...
Sorry, I have to turn off my...
People that are tattooed are pretty open to show that kind of outside that they'd worked on and be a little bit more critical of, why they look the way they do and what that sort of means to their personality or their persona. And I think that when we start talking about the nudes in the landscape or photographing somebody nude, that's not something that they're even really expecting to kind of come out of this. I think that we have a neat way of discussing stuff with people and seeing their perspective because we've dealt with people who are working on their identity or creating their identity and tattooing themselves and coming through a lot of this in order to deal with who we are. And I think some of these nude models grab onto, hey, I've got to do it before I get older, or, I feel really good, or I've just come through a huge change, a life shift, and they want to do this to mark something. But once they've made the mark, that understanding of what they've done, I think, broadens, and it becomes a lot like that tattoo world a little bit.
Yeah. Well, there's also the other thing is that it's a lot like, in terms of being a musician. You can write the lyrics, and then your models are very much co-writer of a song because they're providing you with the melody and the riff.
It's always collaborative, right? Always collaborative.
Within the Nude in the Landscape series, there are half a dozen different models who, Sophia and Emily and Cecilia and Catherine and Olivia, these are all women, and Katrina, these are all women who out of photo shoots or a series of photo shoots came up with ideas or made comments or said, why don't we try this? That completely changed the way on that particular day I thought about creating an image, and having done it with those models then went on to do it many more times. So the body of work, its strength, absolutely comes from the input of my collaborators and creative partners.
Yeah.
Sometimes I am just smart enough to listen to somebody else's great idea.
I think this is a great place to sum it up because sometimes if we shut up and listen, we learn a lot, hey?
We absolutely do.
It's been really good to catch up with you on camera. Great to see you. I can't wait to see the book, not only the tattoo book that I will order, but the book of the of your Nude in the Landscape. I'm I'm really excited to talk, and maybe we'll have a follow-up conversation about that.
I would love it. It's been great to talk to you today, Syx.
Thanks.
Give my best to Aaron.
Will do. Thank you.
Okay. Thank you, my friend.
Thanks, Vince. Take care, buddy.
It was awesome to talk to Vince, and so good that he brings up a lot of those memories that sometimes have maybe just kind of gotten a little foggy or that I've misplaced. It's really great to catch up with somebody, and it's awesome to be able to look back at the family portraits that he's done of Taryn and I, and I was just kind of recounting some of the portraits that he did with me. It's great to have photographer friends like Vince around, and make sure you check out all of his other work. His links are in the description. Hope you catch up for the next episode. Thanks. Oh yeah, one more thing, and again, Shifting Perspectives is brought to you by Pretty in the Algorithm, a curious content creation company that connects you with your community and with each other. Please check out our website and our links. We have a few series that you might be interested in. Check out all the rest of the Shifting Perspectives, and maybe bump on over to our instrumentals. Thanks, guys.